obviously there are many companies out there that are creating courses and have been creating courses, as you mentioned, $20,000 to $100,000 for the past, whatever, couple decades. Are they going to be obsolete? And is the new wave of AI generated courses going to eliminate like a small industry? What are your perspectives on that?
I hope not, and I will say that right out of the bat. But I will also say that most of those companies are serving large corporations, and we're tackling middle-sized corporations. We are not hiring those companies. And if I had a company like that, I will be using generative AI to increase my margins.
Yeah.
And so I hope that they're doing that, and they could be able to do more with less.
We're going through something absolutely historic.
Technologies across the board are growing exponentially.
It's a disruption that's going to completely redefine the way businesses compete.
In the next decade, we're going to lose 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies.
The exponential growth of computing is continuing.
AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Whether you like it or not, that the future cannot be stopped by anyone.
Hi there, everybody. This is Mark Verbenkov, and welcome back to the Future Tech and Foresight podcast. This is episode number 155, and we are returning to artificial intelligence's impact on different aspects of our civilization. Today's focus is going to be on education and workforce training, and specifically how ChatGPT and generative AI is going to be impacting not just how we are learning and accepting knowledge, but really how it's delivered, and which also raises a number of kind of critical questions about how this is going to be impacting the labor force. So it's a little bit reminiscent of some of the earlier episodes where we focused on technological unemployment and the future of work and how labor is going to be impacted by emerging technologies. Earlier episodes focused a lot on virtual reality, especially during the pandemic. But now, of course, we're shifting gears here a little bit to the AI hype wave and how generative artificial intelligence is, of course, impacting this really interesting vertical, really interesting industry. So apart from generative AI, we're also going to be looking at how this is going to be impacting workforce training programs so far. And of course, examining some of the benefits and the challenges that have emerged over the past couple of months, a year or so, with generative AI getting more and more embedded into how people are learning and the trainings that are being given to them. So we'll delve into this new concept of personalized learning in the digital age. And of course, personalization of many different things, whether it's healthcare or training here, is going to be, I think, one of the trends that we're going to be seeing over the next several years as these emerging technologies and, of course, AI really enables or facilitates or brings about this kind of personalization for the different things that we're going to be looking at. So we'll be looking at of course, the implications of the future of work, and we'll be taking a closer look at Pete, which is a AI-powered learning tool, and of course hear about some of the specific examples that companies and individuals have already benefited from its use. We'll also be discussing the predictions for how AI will continue to evolve, specifically in the education sector, and what future technologies could further, or how future technologies could further revolutionize workforce training. So whether you're an educator, a corporate leader, or simply interested in the future of learning, I think this episode offers valuable insights into the transformative power of AI in education. So my guest today is Luis Garcia. He is a seasoned international executive with over 25 years of experience in technology, digital media, and education. As a co-founder of Collectiva, Luis partners with game tech startups to develop strategic growth plans and prepare for fundraising. Previously, he spent 19 years at Full Sail University, where he significantly expanded technology and gaming degree programs and launched an online university that grew to over 12,000 students, generating, of course, substantial revenue. Luis has a background in product development, having led kpasa.com to become the largest online community for US Hispanics, and successfully went public. He's now the president and co-founder of Pete Learning, which serves as a complete training solution for organizations of all sizes, to optimize their training initiatives and maximize their impact without having to hire additional training resources. Great. Well, thanks, Louis, for coming on to the podcast today to talk about how, I guess, artificial intelligence is impacting education, which I think is something that, if I remember correctly, when ChatGPT first came out, students were starting to use it, and that was all the focus, right? It's like no student's going to have to write any essays anymore, and there was a lot of concern about that. But I think we'll be talking a little bit more about the corporate aspect of education. Yeah. But nonetheless, it's good to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
so.
you.
So why don't we get started with a little bit about how you moved into this space, right? So what's the merging and the interest for you from education and artificial intelligence?
So thank you, Mark. You know, I come from technology. I started programming when I was 9 years old.
Okay.
And so, which today is not impressive, but back in the 80s it was.
Sure.
And when I finished college, my early career, I was a software engineer. And rode through the early days of the internet, the .com. You know, that's where I came from. And landed in higher education almost by you know, not something that I was planning, although I was always been a person that values education. I wasn't really looking into having an academic career. But as it happened, when the .com crash took place, it was a very different environment than today. Back then, there weren't that many technology companies. Today, every company is a technology company.
Right.
If you have skills as engineering, it doesn't really matter. You can go a lot of places. Back then, it wasn't like that. And so I got hired by Full Sail University, which was one of my alma maters, and because they had an interest of having an online university along with their traditional face-to-face education. And so they hired me to do that, and I needed a job, and so I went there and did. Little did I know that I was going to spend 19 years of my career in that institution, and so I didn't know much about learning and the world of education, so I had to learn a lot, run pilots inside to see, you know, what it meant to be a digital education. What does that mean? You know, back then there's no Zoom. The first reaction people had towards digital education was, oh, the same thing we do in the classroom, but there were no tools to do real-time communication back then. And so really you needed to do it in a different way, doing an offline, if you will, you know, and what made people learn, and what are the best conditions at which people will learn at a distance. So I ran some pilots for a couple of years, and then end up designing our learning management system, and then end up growing that. And with the first cohort was 13 students in a master's degree that we launched, and a couple of years later we had 5,000 students, and a couple years after that we have 12,000 degree-seeking students. It became the fastest growing online university in the United States. By the time I was ready to transition to another role, we had 12,000 degree-seeking students. We have hired 1,000 people, and we had launched more than 25 degree programs, and that operation was generating over $180 million a year.
Wow, that's very impressive.
So it became a great exercise to getting into the world of general management, and for me, running all that operation. And then I end up doing other GM type roles inside the university, always creating new things, operations, or running something else. But technology is where I come from, and at some point I really wanted to go back to education, to technology, and so I left the university a couple of years ago. Well, you asked me what got me into education and technology. I'm giving you a long answer how it got me to education, but there was a few things that digital education solved in terms of education, and a few new tricks that it brought that didn't really solve or make things worse. And The biggest thing that digital education solved was distribution, being able to get to more people, because people didn't have to go to where you were and be in a classroom at the same time and all that kind of stuff, right? That got solved. The thing that the new problem that I introduced was curriculum materials. And because in the classroom, if you have a really good expert that is also a good performer, and the materials don't really matter that much. People will absorb information from that expert. And digital education, because you don't have the synchronized element, and you're not interacting in that way with the instructor, the materials do the teaching. So the materials have to be really good. And making really good curriculum materials is very difficult. And so that is a problem that it was introduced. It made the content production for digital education expensive. The other side of the learning equation is what we call evaluation of learning. We call that assessment. And how do we know that the learner learned? And in the traditional world, we use tests. It has been proven, a lot of research gone out there, that it's a terrible way to assess learning, because it's a very unreal situation. You never solve a problem in the real world in just 2 hours and without asking anybody. But it's the easiest way for the instructor to do volume assessment. When we went into the digital world, that didn't really change. And actually it became easier in a way that, because now you can automate it. But it really didn't improve our ability to know whether or not a learner learned. And that problem had really nagged me for a while. And because if you really wanted to do a good job of assessing learning, you will want to engage with the learner one-on-one, ask questions, let the answers, evaluate the answer, keep asking questions, and until you know what they know. But you can't do that. That's not scalable. It's not scalable even in traditional education, because you can engage with all your learners like that. In digital education, it's even worse, because the ratios of student to instructor are much larger. And so that problem didn't really get solved. Artificial intelligence helped with both of those problems, the content generation and the assessments on learning. And that's what got me to combine the two.
Interesting. Well, yeah. Thanks for the lengthy answer.
Yeah, sorry.
No, but it's perfect. I mean, it's the perfect segue into actually diving into AI, right? So, I mean, I think that most people would want to hear a little bit about ChatGPT first, and then we can dive into AI as a broader concept here. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, right? So ChatGPT started impacting students right away, and that's what people were talking about. Could you lay out a little bit how, like, ChatGPT, and I guess we can lump in generative AI in there, how it has been impacting education? I mean, I think it's been what, a year and a half now, almost coming up to 2 years, a little bit over a year and a half since ChatGPT has been public. So I think there's enough time to get a little bit of data and some understanding on that.
Yeah, so in regards to traditional education, I don't work in traditional education, but I still very much involved with it through contacts and my own children.
Sure.
To illustrate your point about how it got to the students so quickly, I am an early adopter of a lot of things, including generative AI. I was there very quickly, and I have 2 children, and my son, my daughter it comes easy to her to write, but my son, it doesn't come very easy to him to write. He struggles with it, and so I thought, oh, let me introduce this tool to my son, so he can help him when he has to do written assignments. So 2 weeks in the release of ChatGPT, I called him into here and said, I want to show you this. And I go to OpenAI, and I'm about to show him that, and he's like, Dad, I already using it.
Oh, wow. Wow. Amazing.
So 15-year-old he was at the time.
Yeah.
And so that's how quickly it got to the students. Like most technologies, it gets first to the student and then to the instructors. And the instructors obviously did not like it, because the assignments and the tasks that you have to do are assumed that you don't have help for writing. And so the first reaction was to reject it. And as most technologies, it's really hard to reject them. And the example that I always give, because I'm old enough to have lived through it, and I'm old enough to have lived through the time at which teachers did not want calculators in the classroom.
Right, right.
And because all their assignments require them to do a lot of manual math, and they lost that battle, and the questions become richer, and they didn't assume you could ask deeper questions because you can make the calculations. And later on, they didn't want the computers in the classroom, even connected to the internet. Even worse, they didn't want that because they didn't want to verify the student to verify what they were saying was true. And they didn't want them to get distracted. They lost that battle. Also today, you go to elementary school where kids have computers already there. So it's never a good idea to try to block the new technology. For me, ChatGPT is just another tool in the tool set. Now, you're going to have to structure your curriculum in a way that you assume that they're going to get writing assistance. And how does that look like? Well, we're going to have to figure that out. They're going to have to figure that out. And but the best places are the ones that are embracing it and making sure they're changing the curriculum in order to assume that it's using this new tool. And it's just the new calculator.
Yeah.
Incredibly
a powerful calculator, but a calculator nonetheless.
Exactly.
No, I think that's a good way of looking at it. Okay, so let's shift maybe a little bit more towards your field of work, a little bit more of the corporate kind of training area. We understand the academic or the educational impact. How has generative AI and ChatGPT for now impacted the work that you're doing?
Well, it has impacted the world, in ways that we're yet to understand, and I will say that it did not. We still don't know all the applications that we can have with generative AI, but the adoption has been incredibly aggressive.
Yeah.
And so I will say that today, almost regardless of the role that you have, especially if it's a desk job in some kind, you should be using it and embracing it, and because it's going to be like you didn't know how to use email in the 90s.
Exactly.
And so that's number one. Number two, in regards to specifically to workforce learning, and what we have seen in the last 10, 15 years, as that more digital education have become available in all forms, in free form, via YouTube, or in paid form via many of the providers of educational content, is that employees are kind of expecting it now. And the challenge is, like everything in life, you want it to be more customized, you want it to be more personalized. And by creating, remember my first problem that I addressed, creating personalized content and is expensive. So large companies address that by creating, training departments. They call them today also learning and development departments. Continue to be the people that are creating curriculum and tracking the learning of the workforce. I've seen departments as small as 5 people, and it runs on a $300,000, $500,000 budget, and as large as 40, 50 people running on $2 million budgets. And so they have the money, they can address it. Small and medium-sized businesses have the exact same need, but they cannot address it. It's too expensive for them.
Right.
One course, if you try to hire a company to create a course for you, it could be as low as $20,000, as high as $100,000, and that's one course. So what we wanted to do in Pete, the company that I'm working on right now, is automate that process. And it's so expensive because translating expertise into curriculum materials is difficult. You need these people called instructional designers that are experts at making that translation of expertise into curriculum. So we use generative AI to automate that. And so now we can take the expertise and generate a course automatically. And then place it in a learning management system. That part doesn't change. But we take a step further, and now we also have tools that can, as a teacher, you cannot engage with every student. Remember, I told you that that's not scalable, but generative AI can.
Right.
And so we have tools that engage the learners one-on-one and perform the process of evaluation of learning automatically.
Fascinating. So
Yes.
it's becoming like a little bit more of a personalized way of interacting with education as well. Because if you're having a AI, I don't know, a co-teacher, or I don't know the term that you're using, but if it's able to, whether it's evaluate or support a student in the learning process, that support is going to be different for every single student, because every student's going to have different needs. And it seems like this way of educating students, or employees in this case, is going to be, how should I say this? The impact of what they're learning is going to be a little bit higher, or substantially higher, right? They're probably going to be better in the evaluations. Retention of information is going to be a lot better. I'm assuming that this is what you're seeing already.
Yes, and we know that the more personalized the learning becomes, the more engaging it becomes, the more retention of the information you'll have. And but again, doing that is very, very, very difficult, and it's tedious, and it takes time. If you have one course, and let's do a very simple example. Let's say on onboarding. All companies usually start their training departments with onboarding. And because you need to teach the same things to the same people coming in, what's the company about, what the history of the company, what is the product, who are the management, what are the rules, and all of that. All that information is the same. And so usually that's where you start. But even that information could be customized depending on who you are, because the engineer that comes into engineering program, they consume information differently. The examples are different from them than the person that comes into the customer support role, or the marketing role, and so on. So if you really wanted to engage those learners and meet them where they are, you will create 5 different courses. Even though the learning outcomes are the same, the way you engage the learner will be different. And so with our software, we can create one course and deliver it 5 different ways.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. And maybe just to go back, this I don't know the right term, but this like co-teacher, the supporting AI, is that just a simple chatbot that people are interacting with? Is it like, I'm remembering now, like Microsoft's Clippy, if you remember way back in the old, is it something like that, but just not an annoying Clippy, and a Clippy that's actually useful?
So it can take the form of Clippy, but the form of a chatbot is a interface that people are becoming very familiar with now. And so yes, is the way you deploy it that can change. Instead of be sitting there constantly, you can actually break it and put it into pieces inside lessons, for instance. So let's say you go through 5 slides of information, and then usually in digital learning you will say, okay, let me put a couple questions here, multiple choice, to see if they got it, right? And also to stop it in case the person is just staring at the screen but not really paying attention. And instead of doing that, you can actually insert a simulation activity right there and then. And then it's not the same question every single time. It's gonna be a question that the bot will ask you based on the information and based on you. And then ask you there, check your knowledge, and then continue on. If you didn't get it, refer you back, all that kind of stuff. So yes, but we foresee very, very soon the ability to do it in a spoken word, and then have the bot answer you in a spoken word as well. Because for roles like customer service, for instance, where we also use this the same tool set for simulations, so we could say, okay, I'm a customer that is very upset about the fact that the software doesn't work very well. And here's what the customer is saying. What do you say back? And right now you have to type, and then the tool will evaluate your answer against the learning outcomes, and give you coaching. Very soon it's going to be, here's the voice of the person, being upset on the phone. What do you answer? And we can even use more information of inflection or all that as part of the evaluation.
Yeah. And I can only imagine that will be 10 times, 100 times more useful than reading some little package that they would have gotten coming into the office. Very cool. Have there been any I don't want to say challenges. Of course, there's challenges whenever you're building something new, but have there been any problems with these students? I know that they're corporate students, but have there been any challenges or problems when they are taking these courses? I mean, it sounds what's the expression? Too good to be true, right?
Well, no, we haven't not heard any complaints from on behalf of the learners, and I'm sure they're going to be areas that or different modalities that they're gonna want. And today, the customization is not at the point where we could create a course on the fly specifically to you, so to speak.
Right.
And so, which is a way to even hyper personalize. I don't think we're very far from that, but we don't do that today. And so that I'm sure somebody said, well, I would have preferred to learn in this way versus this other way. So I think the modalities are going to change. The other part, I think, very soon in the future, we'll be able to do the full feedback. For instance, I evaluate you. I noticed that you have a learning gap. Let me on the fly create a micro course to cover that learning gap.
Very cool.
And we're not very far from that either.
So okay, if that happens, do you have any like estimates of the efficiency gains for organizations? Like, is it going to be, okay, we have our new staff going through training, and they are, I don't know, as ready as somebody who's been on the job for a month or two? Because I'm assuming that people that I've never worked for a large corporation. I've always worked for startups or smaller organizations. I'm assuming that large corporations, you go through a 2-week training, 3-week training, something like that, and then you start working, and you still need like another month or so to like really get understand what your role is. Is this training gonna shrink that time down to like a week or something like that?
That is exactly the hope. And what it's called time to ready and of the first job of the job. And depending on the role, it can be when I work in higher education, for instance, a financial aid advisor, you have to learn a lot of regulations. What they say is incredibly important. They say the wrong thing, and it can be very problematic for the organization. So it will be 3 months before we felt confident that that person was able to guide a student through that process. And then it will be another couple of months in the job, really, before they hit their peak. So we're talking about 5 months really before that employee hits their peak. I am very confident that we could cut that at least in half.
Wow. Yeah.
And if not more. We haven't seen it yet. I mean, we're very new. Most of our customers have been with us for a few months, so we haven't seen the other side of that. But I feel very good about it, and because I've seen those training plans, and they're the best that they could be with the tools that were available at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very interesting. One of the questions that I had, going back to what you're saying before. So, okay, you have these your AI platform that's able to generate these courses. This is a bit more of a meta question, but obviously there are many companies out there that are creating courses and have been creating courses, as you mentioned, $20,000 to $100,000 for the past couple of decades. Are they going to be obsolete? And is the new wave of AI generated courses going to eliminate like a small industry? What are your perspectives on that?
I hope not. And I will say that right out of the bat. But I will also say that most of those companies are serving large corporations, and we're tackling middle-sized corporations, which are not hiring those companies. And
right.
If I had a company like that, I will be using generative AI to increase my margins.
Yeah.
And so I hope that they're doing that, and they could be able to do more with less.
Yeah.
but there is a world in which somebody on the buyer side becomes more savvy and said, you couldn't possibly charge me $100,000 anymore, because I know that you're using tools that are reducing the time frame of that by a 75%. So definitely going to be an adjustment.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine, getting a bill for a course and like, you have a buddy. It's like, well, my buddy can put this together over a weekend, right? Like, what do you charge me $100,000 for? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. I interviewed the CEO of Synthesia about 3 years ago. So maybe we can talk a little bit about added technologies to make these courses maybe a little bit more interactive and engaging. Of course, for those of you that don't know, Synthesia is a deep fake company. They create digital avatars. I don't think they like the term deep fake, though. I think it was synthetic media, I think is the term that they like using, right? So are these courses that you're creating, I'm assuming they're mostly text and video, but are there plans to incorporate synthetic media or deep fakes in the future to make these things a little bit more engaging, or is that already a part of your course?
So we already have audio.
Yeah.
And it's a very big component of what we do, because it's important in the learning process for you to read and listen. And that some people will learn more for the read, some will learn more from the listen. Some people will actually put it together. And also that's part of the personalization. And this, if it is the head of a department that would like that to be his voice or her voice, then it's fantastic. And then they get to put their personality into the course without having to spend the hours and hours and hours that it takes to record all that. And so that we already do, and it's a very big component of our learning experience. We have put on hold the synthetic imaging of person, the avatars, and I have mixed feelings about whether it helps or not the learning process.
Okay.
And usually for a video, even an explainer video, and unless the avatar or the person that is doing it is incredibly engaging, you don't want to see that for more than 15 seconds. And usually when you go to explainers, that cuts and then it goes into graphics, motion graphics, trying to explain you the thing, or even goes to a zoom in into the person in a blackboard or something. And so not really a believer that we're gonna have 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes of a person on camera saying something. So I don't really think that adds that much to the learning process. And but what we could do is use it for a very short amount of time. Hey, I'm the chief financial officer of this company. I want to welcome you, and then take you out and just use your voice. And to the extent that that's no one has really asked for it. And if they do, we'll happily add it, but we're not using it right now. And the voice, yes, absolutely, very, very important.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in creating educational materials, but I would have assumed that having a human in front, whether it's digital or otherwise, would have been more engaging. But yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. Can you talk to some maybe specific examples of like your clients, for instance, that have experienced some benefits or the challenges that they've had, or kind of like what their experience is with using Pete?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our early clients in an early, take that with a grain of salt because we're not a very old company. But but it was surprising to us that the local professional soccer team approached us. The MLS.
Okay.
And they happen to own the stadium too. So their need was that they only employ 50, 60 people, on the premise, but on game day, they employ 200 more. And that counts yes for game day. And they have very little opportunity to give them proper training because it changes a lot throughout the season. And so even though they had like a big kickoff, so to speak, at the beginning of the year, and even not everyone can make it that day, again, to the part that is difficult to do synchronous. And then And then by the time the season ends, half of those people could be different and as well.
Right.
So, but going and spending, $50,000, $100,000 in a digital course, and that's without a platform to deliver it. And
Right.
it just wasn't really cost effective for them. But our solution was very cost effective for them. And because they could already have the training, we could ingest that, use the voice of whoever they want. I think they use the president of the team, and then deliver those courses in short amounts, and those people could take them. And then also, because it's in a learning management system, they could actually track who took what. And now we're speaking about adding to, so getting things that they were not even trained of before as part of their training. Because they did that, then the other stadiums here in Orlando, like the Kia Center where the Orlando Magic play, say, well, we have the exact same problem.
Right.
and
Right.
and they had two stadiums, and so they license our platform as well to solve the exact same problem. And then the Orlando Magic say, I want some of that as well. So we are very deep conversations with the Magic right now for the exact same thing.
Nice.
And so yeah, I mean, we're not expecting that for hourly, temporary employees for us to be a solution, but it has become a great go-to solution for that industry.
Do you think focusing on these temporary workers, because a lot of them are temporary workers, maybe because they don't have the right kind of skills, or of course the job is seasonal or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you see in the next, pick a time horizon, 5-10 years or so, that it could be 2 years, right? That the speed that generative AI is moving, that it gets so, I don't want to say easy, but you can create a course so quickly that you could do kind of personalized course, like mini courses, as you were saying before, for these temporary workers, so that they do have something like a refresher course, or a course that gives them the information that they need for the, 6 months that they're working or so.
Absolutely, that becomes very viable, and those are the kind of conversations we're already having with them. And it's easier for them to take it now twice, and it's easy for us to say, okay, it seems that they learned this, but now we've figured out that they lack this other thing. Let's create a course for that. And in fact, in our platform, we don't charge by the course. We don't even charge by the learner.
Okay.
And to open the possibility to have all kinds of combinations. So
Right.
yeah, absolutely. I think that, but think about it. Today, if you wanted to learn something new, that kind of already is in a way. You can go to YouTube and there's somebody teaching you that. If you want to change the filter of the pool, or the fridge, or change the RAM on your computer, or learn how to play a song, chances are somebody's out there already teaching it. So in a way, we already got there, but you got the right thing. It will be personalized. So.
Yeah. I think that's from all these conversations I'm having on the podcast and all these different domains and industries, that seems to be something that emerging technology, of course, AI being one of the main ones, is enabling across our entire civilization, right? It's companies are starting to be able to personalize their products and services down to a much more fine-grained resolution than they were in the past, where it was just, healthcare, for instance. Here's the healthcare for this kind of population. Well, now we're getting almost down to the individual. You need to take these pills, or you need to have, this kind of scan or whatever.
I think that's an
very
exciting future.
Yeah.
Other places where I think it could be that we're having interesting traction is growing companies in general to start. Like we have a startup in a portfolio that they knew they were going to hire 50 people in the span of 6 months. So the CHRO came to us and said, I'm just going to start with you from the beginning. And onboarding and sexual harassment and introducing like everything. We're the training department and for them. And so great, especially things that are compliance based. Sure. I think it's a tremendous applications of what we do, because no one wants to read the compliance processes, and but they do need to have them, and they do need to learn them. And so instead of reading a manual, you can actually get an engaging course that they will ask you questions, and then you'll know that you learn. It's a much more effective way to doing things.
Yeah, I think this example of a startup is actually fascinating, right? Because if you're trying to build the next Google or the next, whatever unicorn company out there, I'm sure that having a staff that is well trained and versed in what you're actually doing and the procedures is tantamount for that. And if you can cut down that training period, as you were saying earlier, by maybe 50%, this might be one of the tools or facilitators to generate more and more unicorns in a shorter time span. Yeah, it's really fascinating. Like all these tools, all these programs, platforms, etc., are just accelerating what we've been doing for the last, well, maybe not 100,000 years, but certainly the last 20 years, in a shortened time span. It's really, really interesting. I had a question here about, and I was sort of touching on that with the deep fakes and the synthetic media. Of course, there's like other tools out there, like virtual reality, for instance. During COVID, I had a lot of guests come on talking about virtual reality. It seems to have maybe died down in the excitement department a little bit. But I still think that there's, I think you can see I have a virtual reality headset back there.
I have the same.
You have the same. Yeah. It's a fascinating technology. And I think that for people who still haven't used it, they don't know how immersive it actually is. And this is the Quest 1. I still haven't used like the Quest 3, which is, supposedly, however many times better. Is that something that you've thought of integrating maybe in the future to incorporate virtual reality or even augmented reality in increasing the immersion aspect of these courses?
Yes. And I'm actually a very big believer of reality technologies. I've been in and out of that for the last since the 90s. Actually.
Right. Okay.
And especially for jobs that require physical movement. And
Yes.
There's definitely a very justified place for full immersion or semi-immersion, however you want to call it. And although it has died down in the mainstream conversation, it hasn't when it comes to on-the-job training for this kind of positions. Actually, have gotten a lot more deeper in there, so it's good. And we have not yet, because of the nature of what we do, being very text-based right now, and haven't gotten there yet. And we haven't had the customers asking for it. But the combination of the two, wow, is incredibly powerful. So yes, it's definitely a market, and for a tool like ours to combine immersion and to tackle jobs that require physical movement, and I think it will be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I can't state the amount of guests that came on talking about education being kind of the main place where VR especially would be very beneficial in the future.
Now, it have to be the right application, like always, right?
Yes,
and there are folks that have been trying to make the classroom be VR. That's just a waste of time. It's terrible to be in a box trapped with an instructor. I don't care if it's live or virtual. It's just strapped in a box, and not everybody learn like that.
Yeah.
But in training, anything that requires physical movement, and for sure, it's a fantastic way to do it.
Yeah. I had a guest on that was talking about training soldiers how to clear landmines. Right. So we're not talking about just education. We're talking about life and death, right? If you don't know how to do it properly. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was certainly some high percentage of like increased efficiency and, understanding of how to do these things compared to not doing it. So
and those kind of jobs also requires repetition.
Yes.
In a way that higher level thinking is not required. So the application has to be in those places in which the learning is more about repetition. And the other great practice that you can bring into that is gamification, because anything that requires repetition opens up to do it in a more fun way with gamification. So I think the combination of the three is the most powerful there is, but it's specifically for training in particular types of jobs.
No, that's something that's definitely important to highlight. You can't be using it for everything. So okay, we've got deep fakes, we've got VR, potentially AR. Are there any other kind of technologies that you're thinking would be relevant to incorporate into your platform in the future? mean, those seem to be the main ones, but
yeah, those are
yeah.
really the main ones, and
Yeah.
and AI really plays a role in all kinds.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about temporary employees. We talked about customer service is another a place, and or it could be jobs that are very regulated in which you have to compliance driven. All of those jobs are great candidates to what we do, and don't know yet exactly how much in the pyramid of knowledge and we get to be. I don't know if you be able to self-generate a course for higher level thinking. I think we can get there, but I don't see that just yet.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. I was watching a very short podcast yesterday where I don't think it was OpenAI, but there was another company that had created a platform of sorts where you type in some text and it generates a video game, right? So it's a video game, and it's a simple video game. It's like Pong or something like that, pretty simple now. But the goal is you just put in some text and eventually you'll be able to get a little bit more of a I don't know, like a digital universe, right? Where you're actually able to interact and you have characters and you have a whole story and things like that. So creating a personalized course from like, hey, I need to understand, as you were saying before, like, I don't know, I need to understand how to set up multiple monitors, right? This is something I did yesterday, right? Like, how do I do that? Well, here's a little course rather than just a YouTube video. And you can state, well, for my specific needs. So yeah. Yeah, the future. I mean, I love this podcast. It's fascinating to think about the future and all these things that are going to come out. And any other, our time's winding down here. Are there any other points that I didn't bring up or that you didn't touch on that you'd like to bring up at the end of the podcast?
Yeah, a few people ask him about our company, Pete, and where is the right target for us, or who is the company that benefits the most from us? And so I always like to bring up that companies that have velocity of hiring, which requires velocity of training, that are not in the thousands of employees and but rather in the hundreds, that don't have a learning solution. And by that I mean a training department, a learning management system, are great beneficiaries of our technology. And they can do what they do, be experts on what they do. We can facilitate with our platform the training, and they can move faster, do better, and focus on what they do best. So if you are in that case, if you are trying to say, well, let me bring my experts and try to turn them into trainers because I don't have any money to do that, don't do that.
Yeah.
And don't make that mistake that many times is very costly, because your people, your human capital is very, very important when you are in a small organization. Use tools like ours and to empower those experts, those leaders, to create the coursework that they need so you can train your people and do what you do. Instead of what most companies do, they make the mistake to try to make the leaders or experts into trainers, or they just stumble with it until they become bigger, and then they can do it right. You can do it right now.
Right. Perfect. Well, I'll have your LinkedIn and your website up on the show notes. Are there any other places that you want people to reach out or follow, or is that good?
No, actually, those are great. We have a great domain. It's rare these days to have a 4-letter domain. So we do have pete.com, PETE.com. And if you want to reach out in LinkedIn, it's Pete Learning. And you can find me there. Please connect with me. And I'll love always to connect with new people.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, Luis. It was an interesting discussion, and I wish you all the best with your project and your company. It's very interesting times. Thanks. Well, thanks for listening to this week's Future Tech and Foresight podcast. If you like what you've heard here, there are, of course, a number of ways that you can support the podcast. The best way would be to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or give a rating on Spotify, which you can find a step-by-step explanation for on the futuretechandforesight.com website. Alternatively, feel free to leave a comment either on the episode show notes or the YouTube channel where you can see video recordings of the interviews. And finally, if you are part of an organization that is aware of the disruptive and transformational impact that emerging and future technologies will bring and want to know more, please get in touch to hear about the strategic foresight services that we offer and how we can help future-proof your organization and take advantage of the phenomenal opportunities available to survive and thrive in the future.
A lot of future-shocked people and future-shocked institutions in our society are simply overwhelmed.
Once there is superintelligence, the fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does.
Science fact is catching up to science fiction.
The first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity needs to make.
The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Within a 10-year design revolution, we can have all humanity living the highest standard of living anybody's ever known.
Progress is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it's going to reach a point where progress is so fast it's going to be a singularity.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
Every single headline points to the birth pangs of a Type 1 civilization.